Coming up next, I'm walking with Dad.
That's why you couldn't walk with Dad, because Dad wasn't there. Dad was trying to survive. I firmly believe that the phrase walking with Dad, literally, mentally, yeah, it's critical. And there are some other adjectives we can use, but just keep it that simple. A literal walk and a mental walk.
And welcome to yet another great episode here at Walking with Dad. This is, of course, the place and the space where we allow for our dads and fathers to give their personal perspective and insight on the significance of being present within their children's life, within the family life altogether, bringing the family back together one step at a time. And of course, this is where we celebrate Father's Day every single day instead of just one calendar day of the year. Today, I have with us another great guest, as I say all the time. This individual I have known of since I was in high school when I watched my very first band tape, first few band tapes of the institution where he was teaching at the time. I've gotten a chance to know this individual on a personal one-on-one basis. Now it's been roughly 20 years now that we've known each other, as I had attended Norfolk State University, continuing my studies, being a part of the Norfolk State University Spartan Legion Marching Band, majoring in trombone as well, and taking private trombone lessons with this individual. And he himself, he is a father of 4 sons, 1 daughter, and has a total of 10 grandchildren. I'm not going to delay the time any longer. To introduce to some and to present to plenty of others, I am welcoming to Walking with Dad today, Mr. Paul Adams. So, Mr. Adams, how are you doing today?
Well, fine. Thank you very much for asking. And how are you?
I'm doing quite well, Mr. Adams. It's a pleasure to see you and to be speaking with you on today. Welcome to Walking with Dad. And I don't know, like I could, of course, say quite a few things about you myself, but if you could you give Walking with Dad just a few words about yourself, like some background, where you're from, anything like that?
Be glad to. And thank you for the invitation. Well, my name is Paul Irvin Adams, I-R-V-I-N, Paul I. Adams. And I'm from the state of Louisiana, Bossier City to be exact. And to be exact, that's northwest Louisiana, approximately 18 miles from east of East Texas, and 71 miles south of Arkansas. So if your geography can come together, you can now appreciate why it's called the Arklatex. And that's because the state, where I live is very close to both states. I attended Charlotte Mitchell High School, which is no longer, of course, during the changes in my life. That's part of the scene that integration impacted, let's say it like that. I need to qualify one other thing about myself before we go further here, is that I am 80 years old. So that'll help you kind of appreciate some of the datings and things that I might highlight and put that in perspective. So from Bossier City, Louisiana, I'm a child of a single parent. I have 2 sisters, and other brothers from, or what we called in my day, half brothers. And we're all together. We communicate. My mother was progressive enough to make sure that we all knew each other. So I'm excited about sharing that as a father, because she was very transparent about things, very direct and transparent in our relationships, because she was concerned about the future and the implications for possible relationships that would not be beneficial medically or mentally for any offsprings that could come out of a relationship with a cousin or sister, I should say, a brother, if you will, however you want to call it. I'm very proud of that. I graduated from high school at age 15. I was the valedictorian of my class. I went on to Southern University. By the way, I lived about 70 miles from Grambling, and most of the folk in my neighborhood went to Grambling, and I chose to do something different. So I was that kid that was different. And I did all the classic things prior to my graduation from high school. Like, I think I need to say this. I was a paper boy. I was very popular in my situation. I sold papers. I collected scrap metal, bottles. Um, um, I would actually go back and recycle the papers that I sold. I had a gentleman in my neighborhood who had a mule on a wagon, and I would save the papers and bundle them, and we would take them to the paper plant and I would sell them. So I was recycling it earlier and didn't know it. I just knew I could make some money. That's part of my entrepreneurial spirit. I think about that. Um, Other simple things that I highlight in my life relative to my development was I also chose to wash windows. I babysat. I picked berries, pecans, pears, peaches, pomegranates, and things like that to generate an income. And at that time, I could get a gallon of berries, go and pick blackberries, and make 50 cents a gallon. Kind of take you guys back to really understand who I am. I'm so old that I remember when gas was 9 cents a gallon. So yeah, that's correct, 9 cents. And that was due to the gas wars that went on between my area, which is Bossier City and Shreveport, Louisiana, and East Texas, because the oil fields were less than 20 miles away from my house. And so the distribution was obvious. They easily without having a lot of overhead. So the people who were the owners of the gas stations were very competitive. Now, I deliberately told you that because I'm actually thinking about this inflation and what I've gone through walking as a dad and rearing my children, observing this what is it called? Why can't I think of it now? What's happening to inflation? Yes, that's the word I'm trying to say. So one last one. This is kind of funny. I think many of you on this line don't know anything about, on this podcast, don't know anything about moon cookies. I want to bring up the moon cookie right quick. I'm so old that when I think about that in my life, I remember when the moon cookie, I could get two for a penny. And then I remember the moon cookie that became one for a penny. And then there were like 2 cent a cookie, et cetera. And from that point on, I had grown enough to know that, okay, prices change. Again, I didn't know the term inflation, but I just knew that I couldn't seem to make enough money to get the things that I used to have because as I grew, I wanted more things. And I now recognize that in my environment or in Black community in my neighborhood, and I don't think it's unique, is that we as a people were taught to be consumers. And we were not taught to invest because our parents were living from day to day for survival. And so I know I'm blessed to have made it through that environment. Now, flashing back to my high school graduation and into college. Oh, I think I said I attended Charlotte Mitchell High School in Bossier City. And then when I think back on my development from high school, I was in the band. Obviously, let me quickly say that. I don't want to omit that. I'm a musician. And so in the band, I actually learned to write music as a result of my determination to participate and quite frankly, I didn't necessarily enjoy playing those marches that we played. We played those classic marches, and we had a lot of popular music and stuff at the time. And I said, why can't I do that? So my music background comes from my mother, who was a singer. As a trombonist, I tried to imitate my mother's singing, and of course, she was not a formally, excuse me, trained, but from she was like maybe two generations from slavery, and of course, they were still dealing with the hymns. They call them old 100s and things like that. And I later found out to know that those were actually pleas for help in most cases and responding to a higher deity. And it was their faith and their determination to survive that caused them to, I should say, caused me, enable them to survive the segregation and the racism that was serious in our lives. So anyway, how I got to Southern University, I'm keep going back and forth because every time I speak about this, it brings something else up. I got to Southern at 15 because my mother was getting me out of Bossier City. She allowed me to go 200 miles away from Bossier as opposed to 70 miles, which would be to go to Grambling as opposed to going to Southern University. And I recognized later in my life that she was very progressive and she was thinking more about my survival because I came from a family who were aggressive, progressive and aggressive. And most of the men in my family didn't live to be 60 years old. They had to leave that area or they were in some way harmed or damaged because there's another history of my family where we were not tolerant of some of the racism. And as a result, some of them were, encountered, they encountered the relationships that would not have been beneficial to their health. So my mother got me out of Bossier City. There was another part of this relationship and walking with dad is that my dad wasn't there. Let me say that again. So my sheroes were my mother and my grandmother. And a quick story about my grandmother. Her name was Mary B. Hollins. My mother's name is Ida Mae Hollins. And my grandmother had a laundry service, which was part of the regimen in that day. She was a part of the help as we know it. But nonetheless, she did most of her work at home because she was the one who babysat for her children and her children's children, if you will, her grandkids. And she could do, what is it called today? At home, in-home
Like
work.
healthcare. Okay.
Yeah, she could do all of her work homes. Like she washed, she ironed, and she made I remember so clearly those boxes that were distributed via the distributors to the local stores. I call it the Wonder Bread box. It would be the wholesale box where they have the loaves of bread and bring to the store and release them.
Yeah.
And they would be long, about maybe, what was that? Maybe 2 feet wide and about 4 feet long. And anyway, I'm bringing this up because she worked for a gentleman who happened to be the chief of police in Bossier City.
Okay.
His name was Captain Jones. That's what I remember about him. In our neighborhood, it was called Captain Jones, not Captain Jones. And I'm bringing her up because she's a dynamic figure in my life to get me where I am because she understood relationships and her relationship with the captain, in my opinion and in retrospect, was currency. It was currency that she could use to assist people in our neighborhood who had children or family members who may have been impacted by the law, and she could appeal to Captain Jones. And why could she appeal to Captain Jones? She was the one who took care of his children when she went to work with him during the day. And she built a lot of trust because she not only did that on the days that she could attend or go to their home, and of course she had to walk, and that was roughly 3 miles. And the one child I want to speak about that she basically reared was a young lady named Billy Jones. And I think I can close on this. Billy Jones was the husband of Hank Williams, a famous country and western star. There was a high profile couple, and Captain Jones had the control of dealing with, obviously, law enforcement. And so that currency she used was part of that saved a lot of folk in our community, but more importantly, that encouraged them to allow me to go away from Boston.
Okay.
That's it. Now that's a story that sets the tone for me walking with dad. And those were my dads, my grandmother and my mother.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely picked up on that, of you mentioning that coming from a single family home. And for starters, I appreciate that, Mr. Adams. You reminded me of the email days, of which is probably why I still don't particularly do too well with emails, even in workplace, because Mr. Adams would have long emails for starters, and then they would be like color coded.
Wow, I forgot about it, but you're right. Yeah, highlighting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate that though, Mr. Adams. There was like five different questions that came to mind within all that, and I'll do my best to remember some of them. But for starters, you had just mentioned the currency part, and the currency of that was your grandmother, correct?
Yes.
The currency that she built up on and became wealthy within, I guess you could say. It
Mhm.
reminds me of a point that Bob Proctor used to teach about, which was how we seek wealth as far as financial wealth, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But we kind of forget along the way about relational wealth.
Yes.
Could you speak as to why that's, as a father yourself, but even as you were coming up, high school and college, even into your professional work, the significance of the relational wealth and building up those relationships?
I apologize for the sound. That's an airplane over my house. Okay. Well, the relational wealth concept to me did not develop or evolve early enough in my life to take full advantage of it. Because one of the things that I'm going to get to what you asked me is that I was always taught to be direct. The thing between my mother and my grandmother, there was no I didn't learn the difference between I didn't know the difference between black and white. Everything had to be a yes, no, very direct. So I didn't understand gray. That's what I'm trying to say. And the gray area for me, as I developed professionally, was what I call the political area. To be sensitive and develop relationships that you can utilize later in life. So I think in one way of sensing what I experienced is that my parents were fundamentalists and they didn't have time to address for me to address my whys. In other words, do this, do that now, and don't speak back. So I kind of learned that. But one of the things, the advantages I think I had about it, because they were so direct, that what I was passionate about, I could focus and get it done because they did not accept mediocrity. It was very important to me to come home from school all of my life and never make a B. I mean, a C, I should say, because all of my grades in all of my classes were like A's upon A's, and few B's. Unfortunately, those records were burned in our house, which was totally destroyed. And I haven't said much about my grandfather, but he left in my life early. I was 5 when he passed. So that brief walk with my dad in that context was very short. but I remember him clearly, and I want to digress a little and go back to him quickly. My grandfather was a pillar of the community. He worked in a creosote plant, which was obvious to our neighborhood because in those days they didn't have cars, so they had to live as close to the facility in which they worked so they could walk and be able to walk not only to work but if necessary walk home to get lunch and etc. I'm being very deliberate when I talk about this because the tone for walking with dad for me is based on these basic principles and experiences I had, my walk as a dad. So I watched them do those things, and what I remember most about my grandfather was that he also participated in the babysitting process with my grandmother and my mother when my mother was working. You know, as a single parent, she had to leave the house and they were working. So some days on weekends when my grandfather would be home, he would take me on his jobs. And what he did in the community, he was actually a carpenter. Today we would call an architect. And he built houses in the community. And one of the things that he did in our community, in the houses he built, because he was a foreman at a creosote plant, and some of you may not know what the creosote is about, but it was a chemical process. It was a chemical, if you will, or liquid or a fluid that was put together to cure the ties on the train track. Now, what are the ties? The wood cross beams, they're like about 8 by 8 beams that are across the track that well, they would lay the tracks on and put the spikes in. And the reason the creosote was there to avoid what? The termites. It would cancel termites. That's why the beams could last as long as they did. So, being the foreman, he was subjected to the curing, I think, and let's use the old good fashioned word. They had to cook the ties. And all the guys who were timbermen would bring those ties to the plant and they would shave them and cut them and dip them in these big vats of creosote and cure them and then come back and store them in a yard. So when the rail companies needed to lay track, this company, I remember it was called TJ Tire Company. They, not tire, TRE, but TIE. And they would haul these pieces to the sites where they would continue to build railroad tracks in that area. So why am I bringing that to bear? He died from carcinogenics. Carcinogens, I guess that's the right word, cancer. That's why he didn't make it to 60. And of course, it was part of that strategy by the other race to utilize black folk because they didn't care about their lives, but they cared about the profits that they made.
Mm.
And so he got what was called in our neighborhood a good job because he made more money than everybody else. But he died before everybody else. Well, they didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know. They were surviving. So I'm steeped in those kinds of memories because that is what has helped to balance me, to stay focused and pursue the best I could for myself and for my students that I encountered during my career. Those are the kinds of things in my background that I can go on and on about that have made me the person that I am and the dad I am.
Yeah. With that, real quick, Mr. Adams. Because you were saying that they didn't know then, and that's probably how many years ago?
I'm 80, so that had to be 75 years ago.
75 years ago. Would you say now that that they still don't know?
Of course. And the reason we don't know, it goes back to my comment about us being consumers and why are we more as a race consumers because all of our parents were devoted and committed to trying to make things better for us. And as a result of so-called better, what was better for them was to have more things. So you could replicate what you have seen in the majority racist homes. For example, my grandmother worked in those homes, and my mother also. So they saw things that Miss Sue had, and they wanted them also.
Of course.
Okay, so what did Miss Sue and her people do? They went ahead and created the Kmart's, the 5 and 10 cent stores. Okay, so they got the cheap things that were imitations of what they brought from their homeland and inherited and things like that.
Yeah.
And they did it deliberately from the perspective of saying, I can make a profit on this. Now they're causing the money to circulate, right? But the products were inexpensive. They also knew that they were going to tear up easy. And once that taste got in people's mouth about being able to be like Miss Sue, or quote unquote, and they wanted more of that because that was the way to see things forward. So nonetheless, we go all the way back to sharecropping and understanding the concept. That was never about you getting out. The goal was to put you in that circle, in that yeah, what's the word I'm trying to, yeah, circulating the money, circulating the wealth from a different perspective, and making you feel like you had a lot. But if you couldn't think beyond that, in which some of our people did, quite a few, quite frankly, and many of those died because they could think progressively,
Of course.
we were subjected and suppressed to be consumers.
Mm.
I can go on and on with that one, but I think the drift is clear.
Yeah. And yeah, we could for sure.
Have you thought about that? Have you thought about that like that?
I think about it often from a lot of different aspects as far, well, anytime I go to work, any given day, but definitely that our community does consist of a lot more consumers than thinkers, how you're touching on as well. Those who are willing to build and even be pioneers of movements of some sort. We're big supporters, but we don't necessarily get the support. Like we're not willing to
Yeah.
initiate something and then get those to come behind us. We'll kind of like join the crowd a lot of the times.
Well, there's one other simple analogy I want to bring to your attention. It's going to sound very simple, but I now understand it a little different as I've aged. We were introduced to sugar,
Yeah.
and that sweet taste. Everybody wants to deal with a sweet taste. Now, the analogy has to deal with money, things like that. So when you get accustomed to sugar, you want to continue it. So when you start thinking about the infant who's nursing their mom, there's a natural sugar. But once they're weaned from that environment and you're fed candy, cookies, and today television, the computer, we think it's cute that the children can operate a computer, and it is for the ones who will be able to carry it forward. But in most cases, it's not even about the computer. It's about how to entertain them in such a way that they, meaning the parents, don't have to, or the fathers don't have to. And they can't because they're out there doing the same thing our grandparents did. They got to make enough money to keep the lifestyle alive. Nobody wants to go. And there's another term that needs to be brought up in this conversation. It's called the bottom or the bottoms. Most of us, in our effort to survive, could not live on the hill. We had to live in the lowland just to survive. And when the floods came, we were the ones that got washed away because the water came off the hill. Now, you can use that analogy in a lot of ways, but that's reality I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Most of us lived near the railroad tracks because you knew that wherever you lived, not only did you have to cross the tracks in some cases, but if you got on that track and walked the track parallel with the bars, it's going to lead you to a major city.
Mm.
We call those hobos. And to get on the train, you get on the train, you may not know where you're going, but you know you're not going to go back to the country. You got out, stole a ride because you believe there was something different. Again, do you see the analogy?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about it like that?
Yeah. 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 Uh, um, and I
If
think,
we could survive the Middle Passage, why couldn't we survive this?
yeah.
And a lot of blood went down the, drain with it. But the point is, the ones who got out got out. Not
Yeah.
to say it was always better, but the point was they did get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's why you couldn't walk with Dad because Dad wasn't there. Dad was trying to survive.
and just one other quick thing to throw in there with that. You look on TV, commercials, movies, and I'll just keep it at the sake of the removal of dad from the equation.
Mhm.
You might have maybe a black father with a white mother and then a mixed child, but typically it might be like a white father with a black woman and a mixed child of some sort. It's everywhere in commercials, and of course it's strategically done. But obviously, if it's done in commercials, then it's depicting something.
It's sending a message.
Yeah, it's the image that's definitely being put out there. Um, yeah, and to get us thinking, but at the same time to get us thinking in a certain way
Yes.
to kind of like invoke anger or being aggravated, whatever the case might be. Um, we could also stay right there for quite a bit as well, Stabs.
Mhm.
Um, but if I could ask you, you had that upbringing, and then obviously going through high school, once again, college, and then getting into your professional work. If I could ask you, because of something that you made mention of having had that background of music, particularly from your mother, um, your arranging skills. I would like to say, I've always thought to myself, Mr. Adams, you and maybe Lindsey B. Sargent, obviously at FAMU. For some odd reason, like y'all were the only two that really paid attention in theory class. Like everybody else can arrange, but it's like y'all were the main two that really paid attention. What drove you from attending music theory in college to then take that and actually apply it to the point of if anybody who has actually heard your arrangements can tell of this is a Paul Adams arrangement.
All right. About Lindsay and myself, most people don't know. I'm going to start there. That I do not play the piano. I utilize the piano when necessary. Lindsay is a phenomenal keyboard player. You know, he knows all that. He has a lot of skills. My skills were limited, and they are limited to my ears and my emotion. That's a really simple way of making the divide clear. So, excuse me. So when I think about us, and by the way, Lindsay and I are good friends. We talk quite, we share, we talk about perspectives. But what makes people know there's a Paul Adams arrangement? I think when they listen, knowing within our culture the different bands and their sounds, the thing that I think I more or less came close to perfection with was with Norfolk State University. And of course, there's some background to all of that. But let's talk about Norfolk State and people recognizing on one of our arrangements is that when Behold the Green and Gold was created, it was a way of branding the university. And I did that back in 1978, I want to say, 76 or 78. Don't remember the number. I have to go get my score to see when I did it. So, no, it had to be before that because I'm thinking about Leon Anderson and those guys, Leon Smith and those guys. But nonetheless, that that motive, behold, is really the key to this, knowing that difference. Because that motif, I was effective in utilizing it in many of our features. And it was always exciting to me to how do I get this in here and make it subtle? And then how do I get in and make it bold and let folks know? And generally, that element alone, no matter what the tune would be, I could do that with that. And I always created, not always, most of the time, I created introductions to pieces that we were going to play as a result of choosing motifs inside the tune that was going to be heard and mixing it with something about behold. And most definitely in the closing of those pieces, is going to be utilized. Now, that principle comes from one concept that I learned in school. When you read a paper, if you understand, you see a headline to an article, right? And generally that headline is going to be telling you what you're going. So I'm going to tell you what you're going to, what I'm going to tell you. I think I'm trying to remember how it goes. And then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you.
Yeah. It's like the heading, the body, and then the conclusion,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
So generally when you read an article in the newspaper, they get your attention with the heading, right?
Yes.
And then they tell you what they said they were going to tell you. In other words, I'm going to tell you. I kind of have it backwards in some kind of way. But anyway, tell you what you're going to hear, then make you hear it.
Yep.
And before I leave, I'm going to tell you what I told you.
Yeah.
Now, that's very simplistic, but the concept is there. And there's a formal, that formula is definitely in journalism. And basically, of course, in music, we call it, setting this theme, introducing the theme, et cetera. And at the end, there's some recapitulation engaged in it to help you understand what you said.
Yes.
So I think that in a nutshell explains why you can tell the difference. And most arrangers don't adhere to that. Not in the environment in which I taught it and teach. The other thing that's significant about the arrangements is, I think, and maybe it's not as much the arrangement as the fact that I taught all of those arrangements. I didn't just write them. And I think that you have arrangements that guys write and they don't get a chance to teach it, to find out what the difficulties are. And the other part of mine, I think, which ended up being a strength or a weakness in one way, is that I was very considerate of the developmental, what was developmentally appropriate for what I saw the band to be. But internally, there was some quantizing going on where I needed to make certain that the people who could make a contribution made their contributions at the right times. In other words, simplified parts to make certain that we could get the most out of every person. Well, that takes a lot of patience, whether you write the part or teach it. And I can think of many times we would be on the field and I had something in an arrangement and that was the arrangement, but the presentation was not conducive to what it was being used for, where O'Neill and I would not necessarily come together before the arrangement in terms of how he was going to write the drill. But most folk don't understand that it was never the drill first. It was the music and then the drill.
Yeah.
And the drill was about our basic fundamental in this environment I'm speaking about the arrangements that are clear, is that we always saw the frontal sound like a stage. So wherever the melody was, we tended to make sure that even if we were moving, a lot of folks don't know that as a particular instrument went by in that point where it was dealing with, it may have had 4 measures of the melody.
Yep.
But that's not written in the score. You teach that based on how you want to maintain the consistency of the sound. Now, you talked about arrangement. I'm talking about a little more than arranging. But I think that initially what I highlighted is what I think that makes a difference. The branding.
Yeah, yeah. And I was actually wanting to, well, if I can go ahead and finally lay it out for anybody that doesn't know, that's watching, tuning in. Um, Mr. Adams was one of my band directors once again when I attended Norfolk State University. Once again, I had studied and majored in trombone, and Mr. Adams was my trombone instructor to the extent of specifically, I remember at one point in time where he had mentioned the biggest difference between him and I was him having 44 years of experience on me. And through the teaching of trombone, arranging, and just perspective, honestly, Mr. Adams always was able to teach music and be able to relate it to certain things and different things in life. And what I'm wanting to set that up with right now, Mr. Adams, is taking your focus on music and specifically arranging and making it yours to your fatherhood because you have four boys, one daughter, to my
Mhm.
understanding, and of course your grandchildren. Your presence in their lives now versus the well, yeah, omission of your grandfather being in place for an extended amount of time and your dad being in place altogether. How impactful would you say that that has been for your children and your now grandchildren?
Okay. The My three biological sons and I were together until the youngest son was 18. I want to say it was 18. Yeah. My oldest son today is 57 years old. Okay. So how does that work? When I think back on my parenting, the mother of my children, my three sons, was excuse me, let me kind of get that out of the way. Of my three sons, basically reared them, mm, I'm going to say for three-fourths of their lives. Because I had to leave where I was from in order to generate the income that I wanted my family to have. So I was gone on an average of, let me try it another way. I literally came home in the summers. I would stay home in the summers 75 days roughly before I went back to band camp wherever I was teaching. And I generally would come home on weekends, like on a Friday, and particularly in the spring, into to Sundays. So I'm sharing that perspective because I had little time with my children. And I had to be kind of like my mother and my grandmother, very precise, direct, and get it done. But not only get the things done that I thought they needed to do and learn, but to be a role model for them. And one of the things that obviously that and from my generation, anyway, is that I was reared in the church,
Okay.
and so whether I understood everything that was going on, I knew that it was a place of peace for me. I knew that it was a place of tranquility, if you will, same word. And after hearing the Bible stories and the rationale for so long, and living the life I was living, I was able to make it make sense. Because as a kid, when I went to church because my grandmother and my mother said you're going to church. There was not a why, not the real why, because they were still also finding for themselves, and their reference had to do with the experiences they had with surviving, so they could have a chance to go on the weekend and vent, to shout, to pray, and pray for the next day to survive. So I was able to, as young people say today, I was able to feel that the emotion. I was real on a lot of emotion, and to be able to be sympathetic, even when I was angry, because most of the anger that I suffered as a child, had I employed it in the context of how I was feeling, I don't think I would have been around to be a dad. So I wanted children. I wanted to have a family. I wanted my children to know that a father was in their lives, even though I wasn't there every day. And that's what kept my consistency up with doing what I could do while I was there and showing up at the right time. I'm recalling when I worked at Howard University. I was director of band at Howard University, and I flew home probably no less than 3 times a month from Washington D.C. because if my sons had a football game or a basketball game or they had achieved something in their schoolwork or whatever, I showed up for those events. I did the same thing when I lived in Jackson, Mississippi, and my home was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I would go home if something major happened with my kids, particularly in terms of their development. We had rituals like my wife and I would take our kids out to restaurants, and we would deliberately go from a cultural perspective to different cuisines of places so they could have different experiences and tastes it. Say, I like it, I don't. I don't care if you eat it all. I need you to deal with this, have this experience. Okay? I'm using those simple analogies, but it's much more than that. Because more importantly, I had a thing going on as a father that simply said, these are the things I expect you to do. And if they were not done, there were consequences. And one of my favorite ones, this is a real simple, I could go deep into that, but I remember oftentimes when I would come home and the trash had not been emptied or whatever, I wouldn't fuss at them. I would take the trash and dump it out on them in the bed. And don't say a word. And that's how I've been. What are you smiling about?
I almost feel that would be worse than the beating. Like,
Yeah,
because it's teaching, it's teaching a lesson. And then you're
because you
doing
knew
it
you
the
had to,
worst.
that was your responsibility. Get it done. Don't leave. It's not there for your mama to do. Take care of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What you saying? Yeah.
I mean, well, I gotta go there because it's what it is, and it's something that you had made mention of too, just to tie it back in. Is obviously I'm not a parent yet, so I won't take on that responsibility and act as such. But from what I've heard of parenting nowadays, I think it was the electronic devices. Um, a lot of children, as you had made mention of, they are advanced that they can, access an electronic device, be able to use it and know where to go within those things way easier than maybe somebody that was coming up around my age. But electronic devices are raising children. Um,
Yeah.
Also that children by choice, maybe at times, other times I'd probably say it's just maybe neglect. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any kind of real true discipline. Um, that's the best way I can really say it. Not everything necessarily needs a hand or a belt to the backside, but I don't know, maybe because a lot of it is falling on a single parent household or because of having to juggle so many different responsibilities as far as having the children, having the profession, wanting to still have friendships and relationships, and then, still have some me time as far as watching TV and being on social media. So it just, for the most part in society, it feels that the children aren't being in any kind of way disciplined as they maybe once were of from what you're mentioning, maybe as you were coming up and maybe even as I was coming up.
Yeah. Well, that's correct. Yes. I've learned that in today's environment, the phrase holding people accountable is not the correct phrase, particularly as a father. Don't hold your children to accountability. Lead them to accountability. And how do you do that? By mentoring, by showing them, and not assuming that they can move in a direction that you think they should move based on just their academic prowess. But more importantly, demonstrate to them what to do. And I'm recalling that simply because there's another analogy or another reality for me is that during those 75 days when I would be home with my kids. By the way, before I go on with this, during that period, I did more performing because I wasn't in the classroom environment. We call it gigging. And I played in all kinds of settings, in different bands. I was the kind of musician when the guys would call me as a sub or whatever, because I always stood on call because I could make more money because the demand was high. And go in and perform and make the performance happen from my perspective, you do my part. So I was always gone on weekends in the summers, whereas in the spring and the fall, I would come home on weekend to just check in. But I was home all week as opposed to being in school all week. Now, where am I going with that or this? I'm thinking clearly about how I had 6 cars. I've had as many as 6 cars with my children. And there were 5 of us, myself, my wife, myself, and my 3 sons. That's 5 cars. But I would have 6. Why did I have 6? Because I always had one of those cars on the blocks to be needing some repairs.
Okay.
So I couldn't afford to to hire someone to repair my cars. I got a book on each one of the cars and got under the cars, on top of the cars, whatever it took, and repaired them. And I insisted that whoever was using that car other than my wife needed to assist me with that repair. And assisting me, in most cases, initially in the beginning, for the young one, as they were young, was pass me a screwdriver. Well, what's a screwdriver? I need that screwdriver. I need a Phillips. What's a Phillips? I could say it, but just to show them. And if they gave me the wrong tool, I would say, this is not it. So what's a screwdriver? What are the pliers? What's a wrench? The hammer, the nails, 8-penny nail, 10-penny nail, 3. So in other words, I did a lot of that as a father. And I didn't have a lot of time to string it out unless it was a big situation. But my point is, that brought me back to my grandfather, because my grandfather, when he was babysitting for me as a carpenter, he would take me with some of the trips to houses with him, and I was the nail boy. He would say, I need five of those nails right in that bucket right there, and then started calling names. And I understood how to get different sizes of nails for him. So that particular point of walking with Dad for me was what I call the boy side, what boys do. I'm from that era where men were men, boys became men.
Yeah.
So as simple as that sounds, that to me is one of the tools, one of the ways you have to walk with your child. Now, I must admit, I've seen some commercials where I've said that they've demonstrated that the fathers are in their kids' lives. They're not all negative. I'm saying the key here is we go back to a Bible verse, lead the child in the way it shall go, and when it's old, it will not depart.
Yes.
Now, you may deviate in getting there, but eventually, when my grandmother would say, when you get your senses together, you come home and you get it right.
Yeah.
So those simple analogies or examples, if you will, are part of my walk, because those are the things that I did. And nobody had to tell me. It's just that I knew which direction I wanted them to go without fussing, or without whipping or beating, whatever. Okay. Now, there were moments in their lives when they did get spanking. And it was somewhat brutal in a way, because it got to the point where I wouldn't do it anymore. And I remember my wife telling me one time there was an incident that happened with one of my sons in a public environment where he was instructed not to do it. And when a big party, quite frankly, outdoor party in Petersburg, Virginia, as a matter of fact,
Mm.
and he disobeyed,
Okay.
and I chastised him in public.
Mm.
And my wife asked me to come to the side. We went back. We went over into a place of privacy, and she chewed me out. Say, don't you
Mm.
ever do that to my child in public. She said, they did. And it made me think about it. And she was right.
Mm.
So I had to come up with some different techniques. Now, I call myself being a stern father at that time, but it wasn't good because I didn't know when to apply it. Because remember, I learned black and white, no gray.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have time to sit down and tell you why, but if I'm dealing with your safety and I need you to deal with that, I need you to respond to me immediately and not get caught up with the crowd. So that message to him was, okay, the other kids were having fun. They're doing this thing. They were playing around water, by the way, a little lake.
Okay.
And I knew he couldn't swim.
Mm.
And I was frightened. I got him. That's my oldest son. But I learned how to make the next step as a dad. And I learned it from my wife. And our relationship was just such that we felt very much comparable from the perspective that we have values that were concurrent. What's the word I want to say? Our values were not that different. It's just that the approach was different.
I was actually just about to touch on that because I could go biblical if I were to remember the exact way that the verse is structured. But what would you say is the difference within disciplining a parent to a child, specifically a dad to a child? The differences between obviously, once again, everything does not require a belt or a hand to a backside or a face, a
Right.
hand across the face or anything. But what would you say is the difference between any kind of a physical disciplining, um, just altogether, versus anger being involved because of whatever the parent themselves might be going through and dealing with, and then any kind of a non-physical disciplining?
Well,
Um,
okay.
yeah.
You really hit a nerve right there because I did learn that. And I wouldn't have thought about it had this sequence had not occurred. Okay, so what evolved out of that process, because I vowed not to strike my kids, was that, oh man, this is really powerful. Because this was my major tool in walking my kids, or my kids walking with me. I'm smiling because I'm trying to get ready to tell you this. When one would do something that was out of line, let's use that phrase, that was not in step with the family's philosophy of what they needed to do as growing young people. Let's say that my middle son, by the way, I didn't never gave you their names. The oldest child is named Paul Damian Adams. My second son is Patrick Denard Adams. And my youngest biological son is Peyton Dwayne Adams. They all have the same initial,
Okay.
PDA. And that's another story behind that. But anyway, back to the discipline. In nonviolence. Yeah, that's right. Way to say that. Nonviolent.
Yeah.
When one would do something that I was going to highlight, they all had to come and stand in front of me at attention. At attention.
Mm.
You couldn't move. No, no. If you moved, I'd start all over. I didn't touch it. I would start from the beginning of what I was saying. I said, don't move. Okay, I'll go back to the beginning. So that kind of whipped them a lot because they got tired of hearing the same thing. They just started looking at each other, don't move. Because they said, I don't want to hear this anymore. They didn't say that, but you know what I'm saying? That's the pressure that was on. And they had to stand at attention.
Mhm.
Now, what was happening? Okay, I would highlight what transpired, or my understanding of what transpired. and address what I thought was a solution. And then I didn't, what my expectations were for them not to let that happen again. But the real trick behind that was I would tell the story like I'm chastising the middle child. Let's say they went stairs, that's it. So let's say I'm chastising Patrick. And when I finish the story, then I look at my oldest son. Now, what did I say? And oh, you weren't listening. So I tell the story over again. I tell the whole thing over again. Say, this is what I want. And then they didn't know who was going to get the question. And so the next time I might look at my oldest son and point over to Pat, to Peyton, he said, so he would do his best, as the youngest, but he would get the essence of it, right? And that was the tool that I used. They had to listen to all the chastising, that verbal thing about why you shouldn't do this. Because I talked a lot of the why. This is what you did, and I want you to tell me why you did it. And then I'm going to say simply, tell me how you got there. There's a what, a why, and a how.
Yeah.
And then I might have a when, with the five W's and one H. Yeah. So I go through that process. And so they really learn from, okay, let me make sure that I'm listening to this because he's going to ask me what happened. And basically, it's an interrogation technique to see if they all have their lie together. Because if they're in it together, they got to tell the same story.
Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, there's going to be some nuance there that makes me go back and say it again. So, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I never touched them in that sense.
Yeah. It's a lot of the mental. Some
That's
might say
correct.
emotional.
Yeah,
And I mean, I don't know. I think that would still be safe to be
that's
able to
safe.
have worked back then just like it could now. Because a simple, don't do that, or what did I say? It
Mhm.
only goes but so far. I'll say that.
Yeah,
And then you got as
excuse me.
far as some teaching to the extent of like, as a parent to a child, I'm teaching you this because out there in society, the police or law enforcement is not going to be that nice with you.
Mhm.
And of course, that's another topic of conversation. Um,
Let me tell you this why I'm thinking about it. You really have me thinking about that part of my rearing. I'm thinking about when I was teaching my sons basketball.
okay.
Okay. And I had a basketball goal in my backyard at the end of the driveway. And I remember clearly that they said they wanted to play basketball, but they didn't know I couldn't play basketball. So I started out with the dribbling, and I would dribble a ball. They would dribble and try to dribble, and I would smack the ball out of the hand. I said, "Oh no, you're not fast enough." And then because I was always at that point in most of their lives, bigger than them, I would dribble the ball, and then I would put my butt in their faces and push them around and stuff. And then I would finally let them get the ball. The point was, you got to be rough. You got to be aggressive. You got to understand the rules, etc. Now that was in dribbling, and then when they got big enough to get the ball close to the goal, I used to do something else. Again, I'm not a basketball player. I
Mm,
would, we would pass the ball back and forth, and I would pass the ball to them, and I say, shoot. Don't think about it. I want you to shoot in the direction of the goal. If I didn't care where it went, because I wanted to develop what reflex. I
yes.
was saying, look, when you get the ball and the ball comes to you, I want you to shoot immediately. I don't care if you use one hand, two hand, or toe, or what. Shoot it toward the goal. That's how I developed their basic reflexes. And we would have fun doing it because they would get frustrated. Then, eventually I would see the ball get higher and higher, and then they finally hit the backboard.
Mm,
I did stuff like that. I also remember watching my sons play basketball in the backyard, and I thought about the pole that was a metal pole. I kept saying, I need to fix that. So what I would do, I took some old quilts and cloth and stuff, and
okay.
I wrapped that pole. I must have had 3 inches of padding around it. I literally wrapped the pole because I wanted them to be rough and more kids were beginning to come to the backyard and play. So I was looking at say things like that
Okay.
because I didn't just talk about it. I did something about it. That to me is the walk that a dad has to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you from your children, your boys, now you have grandchildren. So could you speak about from your perspective that significance of having them present, obviously you being present in their lives, and then what we've also spoken about before as far as the importance of you leaving something to them, because I know that that's been big to you as well.
Yeah, that's really big to me. Well, it's interesting that part of my life. I have to quickly jump to my retirement.
Okay.
There's some things I could talk about before that, but my retirement is the linchpin to where I am now, understanding where I am now. When I retired in 2017 and was celebrated at Norfolk State University in the on-field presentation, it was then when I realized that I had been doing this for 51 years, teaching, you know, because it was, I was passionate about what I did and I worked hard, but it was also kind of easy for me. So I was able to do that and still address my entrepreneurial sensitivities. Even though I didn't make a lot of money doing it, I stayed in touch with my entrepreneurial mindset, coming all the way back to the days when I was a paper boy and doing all those things. Well, I did that to preface the fact that my grandkids don't live within the block of me.
Okay.
My grandparent relationship was I lived with my grandparents, and my cousins lived within the community within less than a mile. And they could walk to grandma's house. They could come there right after school and wait for their parents to come and pick them up. I witnessed that all my life. So in this day and age, it's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have 3 grandkids that live in Burbank, California,
Wow.
other side of the nation.
Hmm.
I have 3 grandkids, who live in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Okay.
I have 1 grandkid that lives in Mobile, Alabama,
Okay.
and her brother, who's deceased, is in Mobile, Alabama.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the parents, I'm talking about the kids, right? My grandkids.
Yes, sir.
Then I have 2 grandkids that live in Alexandria. They're the closest to me.
Okay, here in Virginia. Okay. Okay.
So 3 California, 3 Arkansas, 6, I'm going to say 2 in Alabama, 1 deceased. That's 8. And 2 in Alexandria. That's 10. 9 are alive. Now, that particular point before we go further is to understand for me and my wife, in order to engage in the relationship and get them to know us, we have to go to them more than they can come to us because their parents are working and trying to generate the income to make sure that their lifestyles can be what it can be there.
For sure.
We're the ones free. Now we did all this before I retired, quite frankly. But the point is, in my last 7.5 years, 8 years now, I have we have utilized our time going to see our grandkids.
Mhm.
For what? The same basic reason. When a birthday occurred, we go to the birthday party. When they were born, we were present at all of our grandkids' birth.
Wow.
Then their parties, their first grade, and stuff going, that kind of thing. The dance recitals. There are 6 girls. So man, I've been to so many dance recitals, cheering, cheerleading events, national cheerleading events.
Yeah.
Looking at going to their taekwondo lessons, going to swimming lessons. You know, just last week dealing with the choral. The 11-year-old now is in the elementary choir going to middle school. Had a solo. You know, went to that. Um, you know, engaging in their fundraisers. I've eaten so much popcorn and cookies and stuff. Spending that money to do that. And one time I was dealing with it, and I said, you know what? I'm not buying this. I'm going to send them the money because the people are taking half the money anyway. For the popcorn, and I can pop my own popcorn. so, but I stopped and I decided let me participate. My wife and I, we do that. Now think about it, that's for 9 kids. All right.
Yeah.
These are peripheral. I'm not talking about all the in-depth kinds of things we have to do, but we make it fun. And I play with my grandkids. I play with them. My oldest grandson is 18, just graduated from high school. Last weekend before last, we flew down to Arkansas to be with him for his graduation. And I'm reminded of, now he's 6'4", he's a basketball player, a graduation, he's going to college this year. And when all my grandsons, all 3 of them, no, 1, 2, 3, yeah. I play this reflex game, when you put your hands out, yeah. I've been doing that since they were little. And that playing with them. I wrestle with them, right?
Yeah.
And I play their games, the computer games. I play. I actually introduced them some games that I did as a kid. And I'm thinking about my granddaughter in Alabama. I remember she was trying to enjoy a kite or something. And while I was there, I did something my mother taught me. I literally took a sheet of paper, cut the kite out, and took some straw from the broom and aligned the sticks quite like a flight, like that, and put what they call a bridle on the back and bent the middle, put the thread on the kite and went outside and flew it for her. It blew her mind. She said, what? I took this plain sheet of paper. Now, my mother taught me that, but that was a way to communicate with her, and we play badminton. We have taken those kids to resorts. We resort a lot. We'd say meet us in Branson, the ones in Arkansas, Missouri. We go down there and have all the rooms available for them. When they go to California, we we do all the what you call those things, parks, theme parks.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
yeah. Now, our youngest son worked at Disney at one point, so that was easy. And he's now an executive at Netflix. So we do a lot of all that kind of stuff, and we go there. And so when we go, we hang out with the kids. We go to museums. We take them to museums, let them see, ask questions, and we do that. Aquariums. We do all that kind of thing because we don't go there to sit down. We go there to be active with them, and then we still do one thing that's consistent on both my wife's side in terms of how she reared her kids, her two. We we enjoy taking them to different restaurants. We do that because we want to continue to develop that. No, I'm going to use the word taste buds. Say this is what this is. It's about exposure because we're not doing this in our mind for us. We're doing that to prepare them for the future. We do this all the time, and we will sit down and play the simplest game in the world with them. And obviously, in most cases, we can beat them. But we're not going to win that game. You think I'm going to win that game? No, man. I'm going to be disappointed that I didn't win. One of the family's favorite games when we all get together, the majority of us anyway, is Uno. Oh man, we have fun with that game. And then we play Monopoly.
Okay.
Now, I raised my boys on Monopoly. And now all of us can play Monopoly together, the girls and all, because what we're trying to teach them is how to count money. That's what the real goal is. And look at those consequences when certain things happen. So walking with dad and walking with granddad, to me, is the same thing in the context that fundamentally it's the same. But what I have to do in that context with regard to grandkids is to appreciate what our children have taught them and the way they are raising them. While we may not necessarily agree with everything that they do, we go into their home with respect, knowing that this is their house and we only can be there for a few minutes. And we have to really monitor some of our behavior in order to avoid upsetting the parents or upsetting the kids in a way that can create, difficulty. Now, I've been guilty of that because I've gone there sometimes and, had my way, and then they have to say, look, oh, no, we're not doing that like that. I said, oh, I apologize. I said, you know, but I had to learn too. The grandfather had to learn also.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And probably the most important thing to us is the most exciting and important thing is when they meaning our children, allow them to be with us, for us to take them somewhere. That's the greatest joy. To take them, I was thinking about the two grandkids in Alexandria. We were preparing them in a way to go. We were going to go to New York and take the train.
Yeah.
Well, so what we did, we took them on the metro and one of the farthest distances of the line and let them just experience that. You right? And then when we got around to going up to New York, we went to see the Wiz, what do they call it? Wicked? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, on Broadway and up there in that environment. So we went up and spent a while. But the point is, we try our best to not only engage, but to immerse into their lives, what it is they're doing right now, and try hard to relate to it, but yet fundamentally apply what we want to apply in a way that is not offensive to the parents. And we don't get it right all the time because there's sometimes you just immediately react. And generally it's about safety.
Yes.
I'm not apologetic when I know I'm dealing with something that has to do with safety. I'm not apologetic at all.
Yeah.
It may be a little rough, particularly on the girls, but again, I have to get beyond that. And I have been guilty. Now, I've had their parents that say, look, this you can't talk to girls like that. You can't talk to, they're not old enough to understand. I said, oh yeah, you're right.
I was going to want to ask that, especially because you have, female or girl granddaughters, and you've raised boys. But even if I could tie the two in together, you were, for the most part, not really raised up with the why, but to your sons, you wanted to be able to teach the why, and then obviously to your grandchildren as well. How was the dynamic of those two different phases of your life, coming up not being taught so much of the why, and then as you were of age teaching the why? How did those two dynamics affect you?
Well, I'm the one that ended up learning the most. That's how it affected me. Because I wanted them in my life so much until I had to yield and try to listen, or not try, but listen and make my attempts to participate because I wanted to participate. So that dynamic for me was the conversion, if you will. I had to be converted because I had to flip the switch and remember that I'm talking to little girls, and then little guys. But as they grow up, our relationships have grown in such a way that we can really sit down and have conversations. And when I say that, I don't mean just me and the grandkids. I mean the parents and the grandkids.
Yeah.
And, we may not be the leaders in the conversation, but we can participate. And while we may disagree with the way they discipline them, we have to understand that they're not our children.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. And in private, we may come back and say to our children or our son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, whatever, that I understand, what you're doing, etc. I say, but you really want to be careful about thinking about the future and how this plays out of the house in the real environment. And we don't necessarily try to tell them what to do, but we remind them that, while I'm going to use another phrase, while you're hovering over them, you got to let them fly a little bit and learn, but then come back and make sure that they understand the lesson that they learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's difficult. Yeah. You're still smiling. What's going on, Nate?
That's a strong word to use. Only because it's like you think about sometimes a parent to a child. I think maybe like within like sports, little league sports, a lot of times that example is used where the parent tries to live vicariously through the child of
Yeah.
maybe something experience they did not get a chance to partake in, and because the child is in that position, like they're getting more emotionally attached to whatever that thing might be than the child is. The child's like, I'm just trying to have fun, or I'm hoping
Correct.
to have fun, and the
Yeah.
parent is like, no, but you should. And then it's like, I'm just trying to have fun. I'm trying to live life, and hovering is obviously a real thing. It's a true and real thing, and it can also become dangerous a lot of times as well.
Yeah, because the parents can be permissive in home, and that same strategy that the child is using on them won't work outside of the home.
Mm. Yeah.
Because the relationship is different. And I think that's really critical when you look at the school environment. Because one kid sees another kid, I'm going to use a phrase, have access or is not reprimanded in some way about something that they've done. And then your grandkid goes and does the same thing, and all of a sudden he's admonished or she's admonished. And they come home and tell you, well, that's only one side of the story. So the parent has to be, you know, the old phrase is big enough to go and find out the other side of the story.
Yes.
And generally, when that parent goes and find out about the other side of the story, they only have that one side, and they are biased to what their child said because they want to believe them. When they get the other side of the story, very well may have been what the child said, but it could all there's another side to that story. So you have to be experienced enough and mature enough to acknowledge that your child is not always right. And then you have to go home and teach that child the why, what, the how, when, whatever sequence you want. The five W's are the one H.
Yeah.
So, yes, that dynamic is also very difficult because I can remember times that I've been upset about some things that my grandchild children have told me that I wanted to go in and deal with the principal or whoever. I'm saying that's not your responsibility.
Yeah.
And dealing with school protocol. Now, speaking of walking with dad and granddad again, one of the other things that's really exciting to me is that we have on several occasions gone. Uh, Actually, I'm thinking about two in particular. We went to California, and then we told our children that we were going to be there, and but we didn't want them to tell the grandkids. And so we set a stage where they were in the park, walking in the park. Our youngest son and his three kids. And so we went and sat on we could see them far away. So we went and sat on the bench as they were approaching, and so we were just talking and sitting down like this. And when they got up on us, they said, well, hello. And they looked at us and said, they jumped. It was a big surprise because they didn't have a clue that we were there. Another time, I remember we like doing stuff like that. We went down to Arkansas unannounced. Two times I can think about it. And I'm thinking about school again. We wanted to pick our granddaughter, our youngest granddaughter, up in that family and take her out to dinner after school. So we got permission from their parents, had the parents call the principal to let them know we were coming. And then that after school time, which would normally be the time that they would pick the child up, the child was outside playing in this area with the rest of the kids. And so we just went out. All the teachers who were in charge of the after school event, knew who we were. We had met them. And so we went out and we just sat on the fence and just watched. And finally she saw us. And she kept playing the ball and she looked and she ran over to the fence. All the kids in the yard stopped. They said, "Oh my God." And she was jumping, man. So that's a great feeling also. That happened another time. I'm thinking about we went to what is that? Branson. We had set the stage for them to go to Branson for their birthday party in a resort. So they went and they were having fun. But what they didn't know is that we had already arrived. They didn't know we were there. And we lived in a set of uh, um, apartments down from there.
Yeah.
And so they were there having that party and stuff. So we walked in and knocked up on the door. And we walked in and it just fell. So it's stuff like that, man. We bring all these toys and stuff and balloons and stuff. They come to the door and open the door. Because the parents say, "Open the door." And they walk and they see us. Oh. It's- you know. So we have fun doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and we actually participate in a lot of their projects when they have situations where they need assistance um, with projects that might require some travel or whatever. We'll meet in that setting, and like I said, we enjoy surprising it, and it could happen any time. So I don't know if I'm answering all the things you say, but I'm giving you some insight
Yeah.
on this, and I don't get a chance to really talk about this in a setting that is continuous like this. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and that's actually, Mr. Adams, that's one of the points of this podcast, this platform, this challenge to dads, fathers, to the family altogether, because um, watching plenty of interviews, podcasts, specials, um, fatherhood, that presence, that significance might, for most podcasters or people who are interviewing, might be a segment of what it is that they want to cover. But as a man or as a father, as a dad, a family man, a professional, whoever, athlete, musician, pastor, whoever, they have a component of them that's the father, that's the dad. So that's why I just wanted to dig in a lot more to allow for a dad like yourself to be able to, speak more about, that perspective, that side of life for yourself. And if I could, just, not to hold you for too much more longer, Mr. Adams, I just have two more things kind of tied up into one thing. Um, with Walking with Dad, and you have children that are of age, and then you also have grandchildren who are coming up, to use Walking with Dad as like an audio visual time capsule, so to say. Your sons come back to this 5, 10, maybe 20 years from now, and they have this that you have left for them, some words of wisdom, just some additional insight of what you've already taught to them before in life, but just something else that you can add on to that. What would be something that you would want to leave to your sons of, once again, something by word of mouth that you shared, or just a reminder of something in life through Walking with Dad today?
Well, I want them to remember that I was trying to be the best dad I could be and not having had an experience. Most, when you're a dad for the first time, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming because you're saying to yourself, wow, I participated in bringing this life into this world. And when you're proud of that and when you can embrace that, it knocks you off your feet. Now, having said that, the key to that is that first rodeo with that first child is not only overwhelming, but you have to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to be the perfect dad. Because I've always said that that child's first experience is your first experience. And every time your child has a first in their lives, it's really the first in your life. And that's with each child. So, having said it and keeping it that simple, it's critical that when you recognize that you were not as sharp or perfect, if you want to call it, as you would like to be, or that you realize that your approach to something or an event, whatever, was not the best approach, be willing to adjust and don't be in denial and be able to say to yourself, I learned something. And try to apply the next time a little more thought and or action, whichever, to keep directing the child in the way you think the child should go. Now, the biggest challenge we are having with that, again, back from when I reflect on my life, is that we were limited to our exposure to the real world. Now, the child today can sit right there with you, and you can go through that process that I'm talking about. But the influences are greater because they have more exposure from different people in different situations. And so to harness what it is you want to get done, the child really needs to walk with dad. Because in walking with dad, dad has a great opportunity to embed in that child the philosophies that he feels are necessary for that child to survive. I didn't have the same influences that you had because I didn't have the same access to that information. Even the language that you guys had. Yeah. So I think that I may have capsulized that concept without me going into some long stretch, But that's how I see that. I really I firmly believe that the phrase walking with dad, literally, mentally, yeah, it's critical. And there's some other adjectives we can use, but just keep it that simple. A literal walk and a mental walk. And I think that on that same point, I'd like to rephrase something that I learned from our youngest son. His name is Holly. I think I have a name, Holly or Farrah. Those are the daughters. That's the daughter and the son. Those are my wife's children. Holly is the youngest, but Holly has taught me something that I treasure. And I actually use it in my teaching sometimes. It's something he learned when he was at Jackson State. Um, he graduated in dramatic arts. He's an actor. He went to California. He was Atlanta for a while. He was in that environment, and then he came up here in this environment, and finally moved and went to California and going to find his life. Well, he's not acting now. He's behind the camera. He's in human resources, but he's doing a dynamic job in what he's done. But all those tools they brought together to make the man he is. And he wasn't going to have any kids. But he has three, you know. And it's flipped his lid. It's life.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I did that to honor Holly and to acknowledge that Holly taught me this. And I've talked to him about it. I mean, it's no secret. He learned the phrase, and I want to say he learned it from his mentor there, but anyway, the phrase was the three C's. Have you ever heard of the three C's?
No.
It was a basic philosophy that he utilizes in teaching his kids. And I've tried to implement that even now with my own children who are oldest is 59, but not as open as that. But anyway, I think I've been doing it all along, but I've never identified the three C's like this. Holly talks about choices, first C, challenges, and consequences.
Mm.
This is a thought process. You get it? So if you had to process that, I'm going to put you on the spot now, if you don't mind,
Okay.
and you're not a dad. Think about that. I want you to try to see how you connect those three, and then I'll share with you my perspective, because it may be very well be the same.
And you
The
said
first thing you must do to deal with your choices that you make, really appreciate the challenges that are going to go along with the choices, and then what are the consequences of that process? What do you think?
So yeah, I feel like I'm like how you said you taught your boys standing at attention, make sure I'm listening.
Yeah.
So for starters, with choices, in this day and age in my life, I've been able to take the difference between choices and decisions because we usually get those mixed up. And the reason that choices are significant is I think of like a multiple choice test. Choices lead to decisions. So choices, they're similar to decisions, but they're their own thing. We're given a choice with practically anything in life, the either or, as I like to refer to it as, which leads us into that was a challenge, right? Choices, challenges, and then consequences. The challenge from our choices is that we're not going to be able to please everybody through those choices that we have. And then obviously every choice leads to some sort of a consequence as well, whether it be good or bad. It's a good or bad consequence from whatever that choice is and that challenge that we had to endure along the way. Yeah, I
Okay.
did the best that I could.
No, that's okay. That's your opinion. I'm just sharing the perspective. But if you use a sorting process and going through each one of those words, if you sort, the word sorting, of course, means that you have to have a lot of options out there to sort, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but I tend to think about the consequence first.
Okay. I get it.
If you go backwards in it, what do you get? What consequence do you want? Or which ones you don't want?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
That'll help you decide, do I want to address these challenges along the way? And then that's a sorting process. What are the possibilities of the challenges? And then if you reverse engineer that process and come back to the choices, now you have narrowed your choices down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let not bust and you can start with challenges first. I want to do this, but what's in front of me? Well, if I do that, I'll fall off the cliff. The challenge is, do I really want to meet the challenge? I don't want to fall off. I want to jump off. Now you're challenging yourself to jump off, but when you get to the edge of the cliff, you say, "Wow, no." Now all of a sudden you change your consequences. And I just did that deliberately to kind of exaggerate the point. And of course, you're gonna have lots of choices. But as you're making a choice, you're making it based on your vision of what you want to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you think about your marriage,
Mm-hmm.
you had to make a choice.
Very much.
But it wasn't the ceremony that you were choosing.
No.
It wasn't the money that it was going to take to get it done. That wasn't a choice. The choice had long range implications. So now, spatially speaking, or if you're in depth, they're the kind of choices that you make that result in instant consequences. And they're one that are long range. So you have to look at the depth of the consequence. What is my ultimate consequence?
Yeah.
All right. So again, I think you get my drift on that. So what's happening to me now in that at my age, I'm in the last chapter of my life, chronologically speaking. Would you agree? That's logic.
I would. I would. Yeah.
Yeah. So that reality I have to face. So now I'm focusing on the kind of choices that I'm making that will have a direct impact on my grandchildren more than on myself. So that takes some long range thinking, knowing that I won't be here to see it. And so, what has become the center of my passion right now is how do I want my legacy to be for them? So, there are two sides for me. Number one, we've been working hard on trying to, my wife and I, make sure that our children, though they are separate and far apart, get to know us for themselves.
Okay.
So when we die, and I always tease my grandkids and say, look, I need you to know this about me, because when I die and Nathan Caldwell gets up there telling these lies about me, you have your own decision to agree or disagree,
That's right. That's right.
because you will have met me for yourself, not just because of those stories, because you have an opinion about me just like everybody else.
Of course.
And what I want you to remember about me is that I'm your grandfather.
Yeah.
I'm not Mr. Adams, the band director. I need you to know that part of who I am. I'm not Mr. Adams, the arranger that folk are going to talk about and stuff like that. So it's going to be up to you to appreciate those stories or not. It's okay. But I want to leave this world knowing that you got a chance to know me. Now, why is that? I didn't get a chance to know my grandfather like I longed to know him, particularly after he left, because I wasn't around him long enough. He wasn't around me long enough. He had to go.
Yeah.
So having said that, I think about what's going to impact our lives more than anything. Now, my political perspective really impacts that for me right now, because I'm a firm believer that based on what I'm witnessing at this point in my life, we're headed toward authoritarianism.
Mm.
Now, how do you survive authoritarianism? You're going to have some money.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the color of your skin. It's going to be, how can you stand up to the next guy that has money? And it's money now.
Yeah.
I won't be here when the currency changes. The dominant currency is no longer the dollar.
Yeah.
So I have to put together a plan, a choice, take a choice, and make the effort to leave enough seed in their brain and their sensitivity to what they have to do to feel good that when I leave, I will at least have put them in position to survive.
Mm.
And in order for them to survive, they're going to have to they got to develop relationships. Unlike me, I have not developed as many relationships as I can and plan to,
Okay.
because most of the people who so-called respect and know me see me purely as a musician and arranger, and those folk that are like that. They don't know me. A session like this, you get a chance to see me from a different perspective.
Yes.
And I want my grandkids to have I'm going to use that old-fashioned phrase, a toehold on not only how to make money, but how to position it in such a way that it's going to keep them alive going forward. Otherwise, they're going to be smashed like a roach.
Mm.
So I got to leave them a tool and a vehicle that's going to generate money.
Yes.
Now, how they use it, still up to them, but that's what I want to do. That's the choice I'm making right now. And I found some vehicles that I want to do, but it's late. I think about all the money I made gigging and all that stuff that was not on a 1099, how much I wasted. But that's retrospect. But at that time, it was present because all I had learned basically was to what? To be a consumer.
Consumer. Back to that. Yep. Yeah.
So that's where my head is. That's where my head is. It's that simple.
Yeah, and if I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Adams, if it could be summarized, I think it's like a TV show or it was a series or something like that. But it's basically going to we're on the verge of the haves versus have-nots, basically.
That is correct. That's absolutely what it is. So what am I doing? Doing something I've never done before, and I'm learning. I'm getting into the foreign exchange.
Okay.
I'm learning much more about really how it works and what it's about. In two ventures, two different ventures. I'm getting engaged in appreciating the significance of cryptocurrency. And as being a digital currency, it can't help but be in their future.
Yeah.
Not my future.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's here, but I mean, in terms of the impact it's going to have on my life, because I'm living dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the dollar now is roughly devalued at about 95% of its original value.
Yep.
And people who can understand inverse relationships, that is really what's happening with inflation. The dollar is really technically being devalued all over the world because everybody else is recognizing their currency. It is not the almighty dollar anymore.
Yeah.
And then understanding a little more about decentralized finance,
Yep.
putting that in context with trying to leave some sensitivity to how you use all this. Now, I didn't know anything about all that 5 years ago.
Yep.
But here I am at 80, trying to at least plant a seed. And it's not just isolated to my grandkids. I'm trying to help everybody I can see. And so they can't say, well, I never heard of it. You may not do a darn thing with it, but you can't say you haven't heard of it.
Exactly.
And that's the part of me that's the educator. And so how do you do that? You have to get educated. And so I found vehicles that I can use to do that along with generating a return at the same time.
Mm.
And that's what I'm promoting now. I'm getting ready. I'm dealing with. As a matter of fact, today is the day that I'm going to go ahead and participate financially because all the mechanisms are in place now. Because I've been in pre-launch with the company that I'm dealing with for like 160 days.
Mm.
I've only been participating in the pre-launch for probably 90 of those days, learning.
Yeah.
And really recognizing that I cannot go forward with this plan, or that I would not go forward with this plan, because majority of the people that I know are in my age group, and we think dollars.
Yep.
And not only that do we think dollars, I recognize that the pension plan that they have in place, or the retirement that they have in place, if they live another 30 years, it's not going to be anything. Okay, because it's going to go away.
Yeah.
I spent my money doing everything I told you about. Because before I really came to terms with this, I said, you know what? I'm not leaving this. And my children told me, don't worry about leaving any money. Go ahead and live your life. You earn the money, get it done. Well, I've done that. Now I got to come to terms with, I can live on a little bit that I have. I'm fixed enough to live, but I'm not satisfied knowing what the future holds for my children and grandchildren. So that's why I'm waking up again to get engaged and build the relationships that I know that are there, awaken, if you will, the relationships to not only help myself, but to help them, people like you from your perspective. Because you don't know when you're going to have kids whether they're going to be birth children or adoptions or whatever. So again, having said that, I have to feel good about my choice now. I'm back to choices, challenges.
Yeah.
My choice. This is my choice. Because I chose when I was teaching to stay focused there. I chose when I remarried to stay focused here. Because when I look back on my career and look at the things that I could have done a lot more things, other things,
Mm.
and been successful. But I don't think I would be alive also because I'm a risk taker.
Okay.
I would have been taking unnecessary risks because I would not have been beholding or been responsible to other folk in my life. But I'm driven because my dad wasn't in my life.
Yeah.
And I've come this far with that drive to know that my children are going to be successful or are successful because they believe in family.
Mm.
Our children believe in family. So the value in my relationship with my wife is based on the fact that we have similar values that cause us to be able to coordinate. It's not perfect, but it is what it is. So yes, I'm a senior partner in a concept called unthink retirement. Okay. And that unthink retirement concept is based on guaranteeing 36% return on a trade copy concept in a networking business. Guaranteed 3% per month.
Mm.
Now, I know that if I were a real trader, I could take a greater risk and try to shoot for the 5, the 10, and whatever else.
Yeah.
But in my heart and in my head, that's logical. The three, I'd rather get a guaranteed 3 and build my team on that
Yeah.
because I'm not here to deal with that. And then somebody in my family, be it a grandkid or whoever, can take it and run with it because I want to leave enough money in that and enough depth in it that they can grow it.
Yeah.
Now that's the conservative side of me.
Mm.
The risk taking side of me, I'm dealing with this in a larger system. It's an ecosystem.
Okay.
I'm still talking about walking with dad in my head
Yeah.
that allows me to be more diversified.
Okay.
Okay. Currently, we have in this ecosystem, we've recruited 74,000 people worldwide. The company is in 160 countries,
Mm.
and we deal with all currencies in transitioning. And in this ecosystem, it has, it to me is like a university where you design your own curriculum.
Mm.
You know, you can come in and be a creator and sell within the ecosystem. You can be in direct sales. You can deal with learning sports betting. You can learn, I mean, experts there to teach it.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who are doing it, not people who read books like me when we went to college.
Yeah.
You know, I think about, I can go on that. I mean, there's so many things. Think about this, Nate.
Yeah.
I think about your brother, Matt, more than anything. I remember the day when Matt came to class and I said, Matt, come with me. I took him to the piano department and I said, look, this boy's a musician, but he ain't no darn trombone player. He's not interested in the trombone. He needs to we need to let this out. So you need to teach him some skills on piano because he can already play the piano, but you teach him some technique. He needs to go and do this because he's already ready for the world. But the curriculum does not provide him what he needs.
Mm.
I felt that way about you in the context that you were doing something to appease your parents on the one hand, but you were taught to get a career. I mean, get a certificate. I was taught to get a certificate.
Yep.
But I learned everything that I learned that I do, not everything, the majority, by doing it.
Yeah.
By doing it. and I found my passion. But my stabilizer was I wanted a family.
Mm.
And that stabilization had to do with what? I had the protection of institutionalized retirement plan. I had institutionalized insurance. I didn't have to really think about that because I had been taught what? Get a job, get a contract. Nobody said dig deep into human resources and learn everything you can do and see what advantages you have and disadvantages. I needed to make money. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of brothers who are going to look at this broadcast, or this podcast, and admit that's the truth.
Yeah.
But in order to get what you want, it's going to require some risk. And my backup to my plan was always knowing that I could go and find a job. I could always go and perform and make enough money to survive.
Yeah.
But I chose where I am now, understanding the challenges. Because in a second marriage, I had some experience. I understood some challenges.
Okay.
Yeah. The consequences right now are the same. Oh, I mean, when I say the same, based on what I want. But here's the difference. I didn't anticipate inflation like this.
Mm.
I didn't anticipate really leaving any money for my kids because I'm just a consumer. I'm planning like, okay, yeah, when I'm gone, take the house, do whatever, pay the bills, be done, it's over.
Yeah.
Because I'm pragmatic about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because my drive for wanting the family and wanting my kids to be able to, not my kids, my children and my grandchildren, to have something of value that can live with them instead of saying, okay, sell the house, split the money out and go on to the next. I want to leave that living, it's not a trust, but a living tool, investments that they have opportunities to squabble over if that's what they want to do. But at least it's living. Somebody's going to get it.
Yes.
Somebody's, you know. So I'm really, really motivated to look closer at the world of finances because when I think about the yin, is it the yang or the yin? You know, the Chinese.
I've never known it between the.
Okay, well, the franc. Let's just say the franc. Okay,
Okay.
okay. Think about different currencies in different countries.
Oh, you were talking about the Japanese yen. Yeah, that's
Yen, yen, yeah, yeah, yen.
yeah.
So when I'm thinking about yin and yang, yin,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I'm
that's what I
saying, yeah, that's what my brain is. My brain is over there. So what I'm saying is their currencies are becoming as strong or stronger than the American dollar.
for sure.
And in Europe, they're beginning to think we don't need America anymore because our currencies are very strong.
Yep.
So once everybody starts standing on their own, it's going to push America back. You no longer be just the great leader in the West. And whether you want to admit it or not, this current administration is making that happen faster than it would have been.
For sure.
So now, having said that, I'm more concerned, I keep coming back to this, that my grandkids won't be dealing with dollars. They're going to have some hard currencies, some minerals. They have access and investments in some hard things. They're going to have to start collecting some memes, some coins,
Yes.
and deal with their value.
Yep.
I don't plan to do that. I don't plan to be around it to do that. I may buy some, but the point is, I gotta get in the groove
Yeah.
and create this lane for them to become more sensitive. And the fundamental thing again is, well, I'm successful as much as I think I will be. They have to recognize that I didn't quit at 80. And that sets the tone for them to get 8 to 80. And now you have more advantages in understanding that my grandfather was progressive. My grandmother was progressive. They didn't stop and say, well, I'm 80, I'm going to sit here and die. Wait for death. So that walk for me is like a new walk, but this time with a little more pizzazz. I used to think it was, one way, but now I really want to run, but I'm ignorant. I can't run as fast as I want. I got to take my time and plant the seed and plant it in good soil.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm in the company I'm in. I've identified a lot of things I want to do. But now I've made a choice. I don't know all the challenges in front of me, but I can see some, but I darn sure know what I want the consequences to be. So I'm trying to be careful with making and approaching, I shouldn't say making, but approaching my challenges. That's all it is. That's my walk. That's my new high step. Because I know the muscles are going to go away soon
Yeah, yeah.
and I'll be out of here. I can close on that, man. But I mean, I'm thank you for giving me the time to share that because I'm not so much sure that who listens to this will really get that message to understand that you cannot sit back now. Now's the time. And stocks, let me say one more thing. Stocks are not going to be what they used to be either.
No, sir.
You're in banking, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm preaching to the choir.
With your son, remember?
Say what now?
With your son, I think, is it Peyton, I think?
Yeah, Peyton, right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did mention that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling anything new. I'm just highlighting for you where I am.
Yeah. And I mean, just for walking with dad, like you mentioned, there's gonna be dads that they know to get married or have a child some kind of way, whether it's within marriage or not, to as much and as best as possible be present for their child, and
Yes.
because of that, to have to support and provide for that child one way or another. And you're just basically setting us up for the future, Mr. Adams, through the words of wisdom, and it's basically on these dads, these fathers, these families. And at times I even speak to the daughters and the mothers as well, because the dad is either in the picture or is not. And hopefully if they're in the picture, they're helping. And if they're not, then with their absence, they're typically not helping. So this information goes to everybody.
Yeah.
And it's beneficial for everybody. So, like you said, you wanted to close, and I feel like that's a great place to close. And Mr. Adams, I'm not sure, like how you said, if this has been something like a topic of conversation that you've had the opportunity to share with anybody before, but if not, I'm honored that this is the first time and a great time and opportunity for you to have shared this, and I definitely appreciate your time today here with us on Walking with Dad. And for all of our viewers and everybody that's a part of Walking with Dad, if you have found some sort of value, some golden nuggets, anything that you have shared, that has been shared, that you would like to share, please leave a comment and share with some other fathers, some other family members of this information. Like and subscribe to the page so that we can get this algorithm going. And at the end of the day, we are going to see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.